Long ago, a special dungeon was built for training purposes under the Magic Academy, located in the Galdan Kingdom. Since then, no one has been able to go deeper than the 37th floor, setting a long-standing record. However, this record was soon to fall. Thanks to a group of 4 people who were steadily moving deeper, they managed to reach level 68, and each new day only brought them closer to the pinnacle of glory. These outstanding mages, renowned as unrivaled geniuses, were called Endless Days. Meanwhile, the mage advisor Alec alone explored the 29th level of the dungeon, surrounded by thick fog, ruins, and old burials. He was wearing light clothing, with a scarf and cloak protecting his neck. He walked slowly across the shallow lake, and when he came ashore, he found himself in foggy swamps. He noted in a loud voice that he could simply use a spell that allowed him to walk on water. But he didn't feel much need for magic, because they would soon be moving to the 30th floor. Approaching the root-covered pedestal at the foot of the tree, Alec noticed a glass sphere on it. He wondered if he should take a weapon with him, although he admitted that he didn't fully understand why he needed one. At that moment, images of 4 acquaintances appeared in his head, standing next to him, and also reaching out to a similar sphere. Sadness was reflected in his gaze. 4 years had already passed. Shuddering, he slapped himself on the cheeks, driving away the obsession, and resolutely reached for the sphere, reminding himself that he now had someone to protect. After some time, Alec joined his companions, Crown Prince Regulus, as well as the mages Lenny and Inox. His Highness approached him with an offer to talk. Alec, rummaging through his backpack, put his business aside and turned, asking if they were talking about the next level of the dungeon. However, Regulus explained that he wanted to know something else, the essence of Alec's task in their group. He answered with bewilderment that his duty was to provide magical support to the prince and the entire group. Regulus responded with another question about Alec's actions in the recent battle. The prince reminded him that he was a master of the sword, Lenny was a master of the fire element, and X was able to effectively restrain enemies. But Alec's contribution was unnoticeable. He expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that he limited himself to supporting spells, without actively helping or protecting the group. In his opinion, this was unacceptable for a court wizard. Alec tried to justify himself, saying that support was the most important part of any battle, but Regulus abruptly interrupted him, not wanting to listen to an explanation. The prince expressed irritation that Alec frequently asked everyone to back off or wait, citing unpreparedness. These delays wore him down. Alec begged for a chance to explain. Regulus frowned and demanded that he show him what he was hiding behind his back. Alec pulled out the dagger with a slight hesitation, explaining that it was just a short sword that he thought might be useful in the next level. Regulus responded by snatching the weapon and roughly grabbing Alec by the robes, reminding him that he had already forbidden him from arming himself. The heir accused him of disobedience and emphasized that he would not tolerate those who violated his orders. Despite his father's instructions to tolerate Alec's presence, his patience ran out. With a jerk, he tore the wizard's official robe off, declaring that it was beneath his status. Alec stood there in silence. Regulus declared that in 2 days, they would descend to the 30th level without Alec. Following the prince, Lenny and Inox left in silence. The prince said at the end that he did not need a mage capable only of defensive spells. Later, when it was dark, Alec sat in his room. He dipped his pen in ink again and again, continuing to write. However, his thoughts soon took him astray. He thought about his helplessness, about how he had failed to be useful at a crucial moment. Alec knew that the 30th floor was incredibly dangerous, even for them. He believed that their team was a unit, and that his support meant a lot. He had always understood how he was treated, but he hadn't expected to be considered a burden. He remembered Regulus's words, condemning him for acting on his own. The prince had also refused his help then, citing the fact that he had another hand free. Alec frowned, clutching his quill. For the first time, he felt useless. Nevertheless, he gathered his will into a fist and took up his notes again. He was not going to give up. He hoped that when the king read his notes, he would understand the seriousness of what was happening. After all, despite his weakness, Alec understood how dangerous this dungeon was. The next day, he headed to the palace, but the guards at the gate blocked his way, saying that ordinary citizens were not allowed to enter. While Alec was trying to explain himself, Lenny approached him. She asked him in surprise what he wanted in the palace. Alec asked to tell him what was going on, to which Lenny chuckled and said that apparently he didn't know yet. From now on, he no longer holds the rank of court magician. Alec slowly wandered the streets of the city, dragging his suitcase behind him. He couldn't believe that it was really over. After graduating from the academy, he spent 4 years trying to prove that he was worthy of the title of court magician. But he quickly pushed these thoughts away. Now he was going to prove to those who rejected him what he was capable of. His gaze accidentally fell on an academy student passing by. Looking up, he realized that he himself had not noticed how he found himself in front of this building again. He remembered how he once came here straight from the dungeon, in torn and dirty clothes. Before him stood the stairs leading to the Royal Academy of Magic, the very place where he had spent 4 eventful years of his life. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to him. Turning around, Alec saw a pretty girl with a surprised look. He only managed to say her name, Yora, when she rushed to him and hugged him. The girl happily confirmed that it was indeed her and admitted that she had not expected to meet him here. Alec did not hide his surprise. To his counter-question, she only giggled, answering that the reason for her appearance was a secret. They went for a walk together and started talking. It turned out that Yora had a few more days before leaving for Fassel, and she decided to rest. She confirmed that she had come alone and suggested that they spend this time together. She reminded Alec of the words spoken before graduation, that their paths would diverge, but one day they would definitely meet again. And then she invited him to go with her. She also admitted that she needed his strength and offered to join a group of 3 people engaged in adventurous activities. Alec looked down and covered his eyes with his hand. When Yora asked if he was okay, he quietly apologized. The girl, with a slight smile, also apologized for the sudden offer, reminding him that he was a court mage, not an adventurer. Alec apologized again, and Yora sadly added that perhaps she should look for someone more worthy. Anxiety sounded in her voice, and she gently asked to tell him what had happened. Alec told her his story, and Yora immediately flushed with indignation. When she learned that he had been stripped of his title simply for using support magic, she loudly voiced her displeasure. Alec noted that she was speaking too loudly, to which she pouted in offense. Then she suddenly invited Alec to her home. He was surprised to learn that this was exactly why she had been looking for him all this time. Alec sadly admitted that he had become a different person after losing his title. Yora, still smiling, remarked that she had heard about the boss of the 68th floor, Hydra. She remembered that she had learned about it the day before graduation. The one who had told her about it had called Hydra his final test. She thought back to the past, remembering how she had gathered equipment and provisions, and the 4 of them had gone into the depths of the dungeon. There, Yora and her companions fought fiercely against the monsters, using defensive spells. The girl erected ice walls, reflecting the fire attacks. Behind her, one of the girls volunteered to distract the monster so that Yora could get out of danger. But Yora once again erected a defense of ice, realizing how vulnerable she was without the combined magic of the 5 elements. At that moment, a late mage joined them. Apologizing for the delay, he smiled and cast a powerful spell, an attack based on the 5 elements, painting magic in all colors. It was Alec. Yora also recalled the graduation ceremony, where they discussed the mysterious disappearance of a group of 4 people. It included Onis Lane, Kia Anaruz, Yora Eanes, and their leader. They arrived at the ceremony later than the others. The 4 friends, exhausted, in torn and dirty clothes, walked together, smiling despite their wounds and fatigue. The other graduates looked at them with surprise. That day, as Yora recalled, they cleared the 68th floor. Then, the 4 of them broke up. She turned to Alec and hopefully asked him to start over and continue their endless days. Alec and Yora set off, reaching the city of Fazel. At the foot of the dungeon, adventurers were milling around, and Yora, waving her suitcase, happily shouted that they had arrived. Everything indicated that the legendary 4 were ready to reunite. Walking along the streets of Fassel with Yora, Alec admitted that he had not expected to see so many adventurers in the city. The girl confirmed with a slight smile that adventurers were treated kindly here. She explained that she and 2 companions were using the city as a meeting place, temporarily staying in a dungeon outside the city. Yora reminded them that they needed to register Alec as an adventurer before leaving. She was genuinely happy about his decision to join the group and was enthusiastically looking forward to a new, large-scale adventure. However, when they visited the Seekers Guild, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. The girl behind the counter signed the papers, but then returned them to Yora with an apology, saying that the application was rejected. They were denied access to the dungeon. Alec was confused, and a tense, strained smile appeared on Yora's face. She could not understand the reason for the refusal. When Misha, the counter worker, tried to call the next visitor, Yora stopped her, asking her to reconsider her decision, but she only referred to the rules and suggested coming later with a pass. Alec asked what kind of pass he needed. Then Misha explained that it was a guild card that allowed him to go below the 30th floor, but he could only get it after 2 years in the guild. 2 years seemed like an excessive amount of time to Alec, and he involuntarily covered his face with his hand. Yora did not give in and insisted that Kia had promised support. This name made Misha think. She remembered how Kia had actually appeared recently. Yora was happy, thinking that the issue was resolved, but Misha repeated Kia's words verbatim. Just accept it. After that, there was silence between Alec and Yora. Shas. Resigned, they left the guild and sat on a bench in the center of town, snacking on the go. Yora clutched her head in despair, scolding herself for trusting everything to Kia without explaining what exactly was needed. Alec tried to calm her down. The girl pouted and, taking a bite of her sandwich, complained that they were already on the 52nd floor and that she had neither the desire nor the time to wait 2 years. Having finished her meal, she enthusiastically jumped up, trying to cheer herself up and suggesting that Alec start everything from scratch. He immediately realized that they were talking about a dungeon. Yora explained that he could go down to floors below the 30th floor without any problem, since they were now ordinary adventurers and the city was surrounded by many dungeons. She then led him to the main dungeon of Faisal, adding that they should really enjoy this place. Together, they descended into the damp forest of the 2nd floor. There, Yora pointed her wand at Alec, empowering him with support magic. Immediately after, he used a super speed spell and destroyed several flying demons with one blow. Alec thanked him for his help, but Yora expressed doubts. She thought he was overexerting himself. They were just going to stretch a little that day, not do a full-scale cleanup. However, her gaze immediately froze on a red hornet hovering nearby. Alec suggested that the hornets were rampaging because of a damaged nest. He had read about such cases. Yora admitted that she did not remember how many of these creatures were on the 2nd floor. Despite this, Alec continued the fight, insisting that they needed to break through. Yora understood that the hornets were no problem for him, but her own condition left much to be desired. Then she used protective magic, surrounding herself with a shield. Alec tried to hold her back, assuring her that she was crazy if she decided to go alone. But Yora insisted. The shield will hold, and he must trust her, because now they are one team. These words reminded Alec of how he had once begged the prince not to risk it alone. That was when he began studying support magic, analyzing dungeons, and looking for safe routes. All this time, he thought only about how to eliminate dangers before they approached. Waking up from his memories, he remembered that he was no longer a court magician, but an adventurer. He activated a combat spell, releasing dozens of fiery spears towards the hornets. He then struck with lightning, finally destroying all the enemies. Only dust remained from the hornets. Yora happily patted him on the back, praising him for his excellent work. Alec was surprised by her reaction. She admitted with a smile that he had made her nervous, but he was still the best mage she knew. Alec looked back at her calmly, feeling a warm relief. At that moment, the ground beneath his feet cracked. Something began to burst out of the ground right beneath them. A giant creature jumped out from under the surface and in a matter of seconds rushed upward. Alec did not immediately notice that Yora was not nearby. Looking up, he saw her. She was caught in the teeth of a huge worm, barely holding on to her magic wand. Her eyes were full of fear, because a fall from such a height could end badly. Alec realized that it was because of this monster that the hornets were furious. He gripped his wand tighter and turned to Yora, asking if she had taken the defensive magic course at the academy. At first, the girl looked at him with distrust, but then she understood what he was getting at. Yora calmly replied that she had studied defensive magic at the academy, just like him, although Alec had always been considered a master of offensive spells. At the same time, in the royal mansion, the crown prince learns that Ugly has left the kingdom. Lenny added that she had heard that he had become an adventurer. The prince laughed in response. According to him, the dungeon was no place to play, and Ugly would die at the first opportunity. With a smirk, he said that, knowing Alec, he would disappear as quickly as he appeared. Meanwhile, deep in the dungeon, Alec called upon magic, and a fiery silhouette appeared around him, resembling a huge dragon made of flame. Pointing at the giant worm, Alec designated the target for his spell. The dragon instantly wrapped the creature in fiery rings, giving it no chance to escape. After successfully clearing the floors, Alec and Yora went to the bar to celebrate their successful return. The girl insistently told him to eat properly, He was now part of their team. Alec couldn't help but grin at her cheerful mood. She took a few generous sips of alcohol, and then turned to him with a slight resentment in her voice. Yora exclaimed that his last spell was simply magnificent, but added that they almost got fried together with the enemy. Alec worriedly asked if she had drunk too much. She tried to object, but a few seconds later she fell asleep right at the table. With a slight grin, he noted that his friend still did not tolerate alcohol well, and covered her with his jacket. Sace. One of the men at the bar commented on Alec's behavior with a grin, calling it noble. The tall guy with a mug in his hand questioned how such a man could become an adventurer in Fazil. Alec casually threw a short remark in response, not even deigning to look at him. This offended the stranger, and he began to threaten, demanding that Alec look him in the eyes. Despite the threats, Alec continued drinking, driving his opponent crazy. The man got mad and hit him hard on the head with a bottle. Yora continued to sleep peacefully. The attacker grinned maliciously, believing that he would teach the impudent man a lesson. However, the bottle bounced off the magic shield. The man, finally seeing Alec's gaze, said his name with satisfaction. He knew that this was Galdana's former court mage, and he wondered how he had ended up among the Seekers. Then he handed Alec a folded piece of paper. It turned out to be a pass. The man, finishing the rest of the broken bottle, apologized for his impudence, and admitted that he was not in the best shape at the moment. Alec didn't understand what he was getting at. The man then pointed a shard of glass at him and demanded that he show his true abilities. He sat down at their table while Yora was still asleep and repeated his demand. To reinforce his offer, he showed the pass again and asked if Alec would like to have it. Alec carefully tried to wake up Yora, not taking his eyes off the suspicious guy. Inside, he already knew that he would not accept such an offer. A minute later, the girl opened her eyes with difficulty and sleepily asked what was going on. Seeing the man, Yora recognized him as the guildmaster. Tiredly, but surprised, she asked him what he was doing there. Alec was amazed that the guildmaster had been so close all this time. Rivier, without waiting for questions, invited them to come with him. He led them into the guild building and led them through a hidden passage into its depths. They went down to the underground arena, a huge room with stands on the sides. The guild leader proudly declared that this was their training arena, accessible only to the chosen ones. While Alec and Yora looked around in surprise, Rivier flexed his fists and cracked his knuckles. He introduced himself and said that he wanted to personally evaluate Alec's abilities, asking him to take off his cloak. Alec realized that the boss wanted to see his potential before issuing a pass. Yora encouraged him, saying that such a chance might not come again. However, Alec, looking at his hand, admitted that his mana had not yet recovered. But he agreed with Yora. It was not worth missing the opportunity. He promised that he would soon stand next to them again. The girl enthusiastically supported her friend. Alec stood up, pointed his wand at Rivier and declared that he was ready, while the guild leader brought his body into fighting shape. Rivier, slightly squinting, said that he had heard of Alec as Galdana's court magician. He, without hiding his bitterness, admitted that the position had long since been lost. During a short pause in the fight, Alec tried to remember where he had heard the name Riviera Stasi before. The memory was stirred. It was the legendary mage who once led a squad of S-rank adventurers who terrorized the dungeons 10 years ago. Alec came to the conclusion that he might have been strong in the past, but time spares no one. He knew that the advantage would go to the one who struck first. Without hesitation, Alec activated his fastest and most accurate magic, Lightning Bolt. However, Riviere was not going to give in, and immediately responded by using the counterattack Splash. Their spells diverged in an arc, and despite the synchronicity of the attacks, both fighters managed to dodge. Seeing the strength of his opponent, Alec realized that Riviere was still incredibly dangerous. Wave after wave of his magic rained down, and Alec tried to build a defense, observing his technique. Although lightning was his fastest spell, he was amazed at how quickly Riviere parried the blow. Realizing that long-range combat was not producing results, Alec decided to change his strategy, close the distance, engage in close combat, and use combined magic to distract his opponent. But before he could get close, Riviere activated support magic, enhancing his physical parameters. The blow followed immediately. Riviere, like lightning, jumped up to him and hit him in the head with all his might. Alec's body flew a good 20 meters and crashed against the stone wall with a roar. Yora froze, clenching her hands, her heart beating in panic. But Riviere, looking at his defeated opponent, changed his expression. Disappointment and slight resentment flashed in his gaze when he realized that Alec had put up his shield again and did not even try to respond with a blow. He admitted that the enemy had managed to activate magic while moving. Such a reaction was worthy of praise. Alec confirmed this in a measured tone, adding that it was not easy to work so precisely. He remembered Rivier's words about the superiority of attack over defense, and realized that Rivier lived by these principles himself. Rivier's defensive attack was truly devastating. And now, Alec personally experienced what it was like to fight an S-rank adventurer. His thoughts raced. The shield was no longer an option. His mana was running low. He needed to think of another approach. But suddenly, memories flooded his mind again. An image of the Crown Prince appeared before his mind's eye. Alec chuckled, remembering his prohibition on using weapons during training. And then he realized, those restrictions no longer had power over him. Casting a final glance at his old self, Alec cast aside his doubts. Here, underground, he was free. Without holding back, he drew his sword. Seeing this, Rivier suggested that he surrender, using a new wave of attack. But Alec dodged and began to rapidly close the distance. Rivier was sure that at such a distance Alec would not have time to parry the blow. However, he did not dodge. Standing motionless, he said that if Rivier decided to attack now, he would no longer have a chance to avoid an answer. At that moment, Alec launched a bolt of lightning straight at the target. After the flash of the spell, there was a deathly silence. The opponents looked at each other in silence. Rivier rushed to attack again, but Alec dodged in time. There was a tense silence in the air. Then, a satisfied grin appeared on Rivier's face. He admitted that he was surprised that Alec had been able to break his spell in such a short time. He added that it seemed that Yora had made the right choice. Alec nodded, looking into his opponent's eyes. Rivier's smile widened, admitting that the fight had been more exciting than he had expected, that his mood made it clear that he was not going to stop. His smile turned predatory as massive metal gloves materialized on his hands. He proudly declared that this was his finest dragon artifact. Alec, standing across from him, only responded with an equally predatory grin. Cest artifacts were considered among the most valuable treasures of the dungeons. They could take any form, weapons, armor, amulets, but their value lay elsewhere. Constant improvements without the use of magic made them desirable trophies for any adventurer. Their rarity only increased this desire. Cest Rivier used the dragon artifact to deliver a crushing blow, but Alec managed to jump back. The powerful fist crashed into the stone, leaving a crack in the floor. Raising his sword, Alec mentally called his opponent a liar. He watched in horror as Rivier easily crushed the stone, like a rotten tree. The power of the artifact was monstrous. Rivier himself, looking at the dodging opponent, grinned and, reminding him to surrender, approached again. But Alec, ignoring the mockery, raised his hand. The magic was preparing to be released, and an excited smile appeared on his face. He used Thunderbolt again, but the blow was powerless. Riviera's artifact gloves absorbed the magic. Cest Rivier approached and declared that such attacks were no longer effective. He rushed forward, but Alec dodged. The irritated guildmaster demanded that the enemy stop running and start fighting in earnest, otherwise there would be no mercy. Off to the side, Yora, with worry in her eyes, began to doubt Alec's tactics. The Riviera artifact was not just a decoration. It was a dragon artifact that increased both attack and defense to a terrifying level. The blows rained down non-stop. Alec continued to dodge. Then Riviera was enveloped in magic, and Alec realized that the artifact not only increased strength, but also healed wounds. The longer the fight lasted, the worse the former mage's situation became. Yorth was aware of this. She tried to stop the fight, turning to Rivier, reminding him that he was too strong for such a fight. He only confirmed that he was more serious than ever. Alec tried to attack while the enemy's attention was distracted, but all in vain. The blows to Rivier's body did not cause noticeable damage. He continued to recover. Cest Rivier laughed, admitting that Alec had finally begun to think correctly. The more he thought, the faster the artifact healed the wearer. Understanding this, Alec came to the conclusion that he needed to act more often, not giving the opponent time to recover. He decided to cast a powerful spell at point-blank range. But the remaining mana was not enough. He had no idea whether he could withstand the final blow. It would all come down to one throw. A miss, and he would lose. But he remembered the past, the days when he fought in the dungeons for weeks without rest. This realization gave him confidence. Now he had to fight at the limit of his abilities. But before he attacked, Rivier suddenly jumped up and struck, accusing him of slowness. Alec barely managed to stay on his feet, but managed to get behind him and strike him in the side with his sword. It was superficial, and Rivier, calling him a weakling, attacked again. The blow was met with a sword. Alec narrowly avoided Rivier's next attack. The wall behind him cracked. He praised him, but declared that the victory would still be his. The blow seemed fatal, but Alec activated the shield in time. Yora realized with relief that he had been waiting for the right moment all this time. She screamed, calling for the decisive attack. Alec, gathering all his strength, delivered a powerful blow with his sword into Rivier's chest. He cried out, clenching his teeth in pain, and fell, defeated. Alec stood behind him, preparing for the next blow, reminding him of his opponent's words about defeat. Rivier turned with difficulty, as another, albeit weak, blow fell upon him. He noticed that the blade had almost melted. His gaze fell on the fragment in Alec's hand. Only the hilt remained. Before he could say anything, he saw his opponent's body go limp. Alec's mana ran out, and he fell unconscious. Alec lay unconscious, and Yora watched anxiously, awaiting the verdict of the guildmaster, who silently frowned. But before he could say anything, he was interrupted. A man in dark clothes with blonde hair entered the arena. He noted with irony that he thought Rivier had decided to disappear, but it turned out that he was just having fun in an underground arena. He called Rivier an old man, and mockingly questioned his right to be called an S-rank adventurer. Rivier told him to shut up, and he and Yora looked at the intruder with suspicion. He, however, admitted that although there was an even greater difference between Alec and Rivier, the newcomer was quite worthy of respect. He let them pass, then walked over to Alec's lifeless body, leaned down, and grinned as he congratulated him on his victory. He then added that Alec couldn't hear anything anyway, and laughed. There were only 4 left in the ruined arena, covered in dust. Yora dropped down next to Alec, trying to bring him back to his senses. Ornis, smirking, accused Yora of ruining all the fun. He added that if she were stronger, he would have joined her team. Yora, frowning, reminded him that he himself had failed the aptitude test 4 years ago. Rivier's words only added to the humiliation. He admitted that Alec might reach his level in 10 years. Ornis laughed. He hadn't expected to hear that from his friend. Rivier's smug smile never left his face. The young man clenched his fists, grinning, like, by that time Rivier will already die of old age, and he himself will remain young. But then he flared up, indignant that his friend was given 10 years. After all, he could have defeated him now. Yora called on both of them to calm down. After leaving the arena, the 4 headed to a cozy wooden house. The interior was simple and warm. Alec, covered in bruises and torn clothes, was still unconscious. He was carefully laid on the couch and covered with a blanket. Rivier assured that the healers had already worked. Now all that was left was to rest. Yora thanked him and sat down next to Alec, waiting for him to come to. Ornis, lounging next to him, said with a grin that he had not expected to see Alec in the role of an adventurer. However, his face quickly changed, becoming softer. He admitted that he was glad about this and asked how Yora managed to persuade him. She answered that she did not know. Alec simply said that too much had happened at court. A slight sadness was reflected on the girl's face. Meanwhile, Rivier sipped from his glass, smiling. He expressed disappointment in the rulers of Galdana. Ornis agreed. In his opinion, there was no place for a court magician among the common people. He spoke with disgust about the caste system of society and expressed the hope that sooner or later the people would tire of such divisions. He admitted that he at least hoped so. Rivier, on the contrary, was pessimistic. He recalled that even in 4 years, Alec had not been able to change anything at the top of power. Yora suddenly smiled, which for some reason irritated Ornis. He angrily asked her why she was smiling. Did his words seem funny to her? She replied that she was just glad that everyone thought the same. In response, Ornis jokingly took off her hat and stuck out his tongue, which offended Yora. Rivier ignored their squabble and asked, why did Alec decide to become a court magician and work there for so many years? Ornis answered indifferently, obviously for the money. However, Rivier's expression showed that he had expected something different. He asked Yora to explain. She explained. Alec's mother died early. His father was in debt. Even in his youth, Alec, with a dreamy smile, said that he would become a court magician to make life easier for himself and his father. Hearing this, Rivier thought about it. He put his glass on the table, wondering how much the need for money had determined Alec's choice. At that moment, an excited Misha ran into the room, saying that there were problems. She looked scared. Yora immediately asked what was going on, but she didn't have time to explain anything. Rivier suddenly picked her up by the shirt, slightly lifting her into the air. Holding the surprised Misha on his arm, he said he would be away for a while. Before leaving, Yorth asked curiously if he knew what was going on in the guild. He replied that there was probably another fight or confusion. At this, Ornis had already approached the liquor cabinet and uncorked a bottle. Ignoring Rivier, he drank a little and said that he could tell Yorha many interesting things if she wanted. The girl became a little sad. Later, during the conversation, Ornis became increasingly gloomy as he listened to her story. He exclaimed that, judging by her words, the crown prince had completely lost his mind. He forbade weapons, made people carry luggage, did not allow the court mage to use magic. There was a mixture of anger and regret in his voice. Ornis repeated with emotion in his voice, "All this is madness." Yorha nodded with a gloomy face and added that the crown prince considered support magic useless. She admitted that she had once thought the same. This surprised Ornis. He did not know that Alec had mastered support magic. Yorha reminded him with surprise. Alec began using it back in the days of the academy. Then he asked with interest whether Alec was learning magic from scratch. Jokingly added that he himself had no talent for it. Yorha, with a gentle smile, objected. On the contrary, his protective spells were at a high level. Ornis's expression became displeased. He could not understand how the prince could treat Alec like that. Shorha voiced her guess that perhaps Alec had been excluded from the team precisely because he was too strong. These words touched Ornis to the depths of his soul. He jumped up abruptly and hit the window with all his might. The glass shattered into pieces. The shards fell on the floor. Yorha covered herself with her hands from the flying debris. Ornis, covered in small cuts, did not even notice the pain. He was seething with anger. At that moment, Alec slowly opened his eyes. He regained consciousness with difficulty, and seeing Ornis in front of him, asked him what he was doing there. Ornis's expression softened. He carefully asked if Alec was really awake. A few seconds later, Alec sat up and looked around the room. He tried to say something, but the words were unintelligible. Yorha interrupted him, happily holding out her pass. The result of the test she had passed. Alec smiled. Now he would be able to travel with her and go down to the lower levels of the dungeon. But his joy was interrupted by Ornis's phrase. He said that there was one more thing to do before that. Alec looked at him in confusion. Sace Ornis suddenly changed. With a face full of madness, he began to speak passionately that they must take revenge, punish the prince's group, and prove the power of the court magician. He swore to grind them into dust. Alec covered his face with his hand. He asked Ornis to calm down. He admitted that the hurt was still there, but now he didn't care. Ornis refused to give in. Yorha tried to argue. If they attacked, it would be against the rules and could lead to trouble. But Ornis insisted. They had treated their comrade badly. Yorha wanted to explain, but Alec himself intervened. He asked Ornis to stop embarrassing the leader, adding that he was fine. He admitted that he was glad to become an adventurer and did not want to return to the past. Ornis fell silent. A moment later, he turned to his friend with a smile. He said that if Alec was happy, then together they would become the best adventurers in the world. Alec didn't immediately understand what he was getting at. Ornis, not noticing this, continued. They would become famous. The whole world would learn about a court magician. He began to fantasize out loud with delight, imagining crowds of admirers begging him for help, and laughed merrily. He turned to Alec and said that he was looking forward to this moment. If anything happened, he would be the first to give up on the prince. Alec smiled. If they really were the best, then they could even surpass the prince's team. Late in the evening, Rivier was in one of the rooms. In front of him, sitting on the bed, was Krista, all covered in wounds and blood. He asked if anyone else had returned. She was silent. Then he asked worriedly what had happened. If even an S-rank group couldn't handle it, it was serious. Krista replied. They needed more people, and they definitely needed strong ones. Rivier was at a loss for words. Then he quietly said that he would need her help. Krista's wounds had already been treated, the blood had disappeared, and the bandages were tightly wrapped around her body. Later, adventurers gathered in one of the rooms. At the table with a map and notes sat Yora, Ornis, Krista, and Rivier himself. They looked at everyone and asked, "Where is Alec?" Krista asked if she meant Alec Jaglet, the mage of the 5 elements. Ornis was surprised. He didn't know that she knew him. The girl nodded, confirming, yes, it was him. The narrator explains that he managed to defeat the level 68 boss using a strategy based on attacking all 5 of the enemy's heads with magic of different elements at the same time. Klasha explains that the other participants realized that it was almost impossible, not just to hit it, but to do it in sync. They soon learned that one person had managed to do it, for which he received the nickname Mage of the 5 Elements. Alec reflects on how little he still knows about the man. His nickname is different from the one he went by at the academy. He adds that he himself is not one of them, and that the invitations to that fight were sent to A-rank adventurers. He wonders if she really thinks so. The girl confidently replies, "In terms of rank, quite so, and they would be glad to see him among them." Ornis advises to stay away from everyone, to which Yora, clinging to him, remarks that this is exactly what she was taught at the Royal Academy. Alec agrees with a smile. Alec looks away, his expression distant, worried. An outstretched hand appears in front of him. Yora touches his forehead and jokingly remarks that he has developed wrinkles. He was growing up and gradually getting older. With a soft smile, she reaches out to him and softly says his name. Alec asks in surprise when she arrived. She replies that Misha told her where he is and adds that he should spend less time on books. Klasha asks how he is feeling. Alec is a little confused and politely asks how she is feeling. She smiles confidently and invites him to look at herself. He clearly doesn't look well. The next second, Klasha anxiously activates a healing spell, and Alec watches in surprise as a stream of magical energy envelops him. He says he doesn't care where she was or what she did, but she calmly offers to share her magic if something is troubling him, and there is genuine concern in her voice. Alec looks straight ahead, confidently asserting that at the slightest hint of danger, he will immediately react. Soon he excitedly announces that they have finally completed their preparations. The girl, surprised, asks if she is really participating. He happily shouts that they have been given a new task by the old man, reminds Alec that he himself wanted to go on a real adventure. A splash screen appears on the screen, showing the entrance to Fazel's western dungeon and the caption, "This dungeon has been attacked." The heroes descend the stone steps. One of them asks, "Tank killer?" The second clarifies, in plain language, "Yes, that's it." The girl explains that the potion she prepared contains only healing magic, but for some reason it does not work on him. Alec asks Klasha in surprise what she is doing here, and Ornis, hearing this, only briefly replies that he now understands everything. He looks at her with a question in his eyes, but Klasha, crossing her arms, hesitantly admits that she herself doesn't know. He angrily calls her a fool for forcing him to come with them. She calls him a fool in return, and brazenly suggests that he object if he doesn't like something. Ornis screams and attacks someone, but is immediately kicked by a girl with long hair. At that moment, someone else sternly warns them. If they don't calm down, they won't reach the dungeon alive. He asks why they are going there, since Krista has already returned. The girl, visibly nervous, explains. The Bloodflower group is ranked 4th among the S ranks. She rushes forward with a sword in her hand and reports that of the entire group that attacked the boss in the dungeon, only Krista returned. Now they are going to save the others. Ornis lies on the ground and notes with alarm that they might not make it in time, since they are on the 64th floor. He explains that the core is necessary to progress deeper. It drops from bosses and allows you to skip battles. The girl happily confirms that they have one. The girl with shining eyes confidently declares that they still have 52 of these cores left, and they will quickly reach the required level. She adds that Krista gave them hers. He wonders why some A-rank group was given such a task. The girl, sitting with her back turned, hesitantly answers that she doesn't even know how to explain it. She then clarifies that there are 2 reasons. The first is that the guild leader himself personally chose them for this task. She reminds him that he is also participating, and hints that someone forgot to mention their legend. Alec smiles and notes that this legend really works unexpectedly effectively. Protagonist is confused about what is going on, especially Alec's calmness. Classia asks him with a confident smile why he would be angry. Alec only awkwardly looks away in response. He regretfully admits that his skills are now far from what they once were, adding that the guildmaster only chose the 3 of them. He calmly says that he does not consider himself worthy of being near them and doubts that he should be the one to play the role of bait. Classia confidently asks a counter-question. Who, if not him? At this moment, a muscular guy with his hands on his belt appears in the foreground. Next to him are 2 calmly smiling girls. The boy confidently declares that they can only rely on her because a strong group needs a powerful mage. The girl vigorously agrees, her gaze full of determination. The bearded man explains in a confident tone that the guild leader promised rare stones and a quest if at least one of them returned. He also adds that the second attempt would have failed anyway without it. Protagonist laughed, and Alec, a little nervously, asked him if that would be an option. The girl smiled warmly and assured Alec that the guild leader also had high hopes for him. Protagonist, with a smug grin, asked if they would become legends again. Alec just looked at him calmly in response, smiling slightly. The girl thought about it, trying to remember the last time they were legendary. The one with the butterfly-shaped hair clip laughed, admitting that she couldn't even remember who had called them that. After graduating from the academy, the entire group smiled confidently, and one of them declared that it was time to become famous again. Everyone looked down, concentrating. Protagonist shouted loudly that it was time to begin their own legend, and the team rushed forward. Protagonist cried out, shouting a battle cry, and brought his weapon down hard on the approaching skeletons. He exclaimed with delight that here it was, the 64th floor, while behind him a furious battle between 2 fighters was already underway. The girl remarked that the controls were much more difficult here, and he replied that he seemed to have failed again and had not changed at all. This remark was addressed to Almalstege. The sword flew through the air, spinning among the debris. Someone's voice commented sarcastically that this ancient artifact was perfect for such a fool. Alec quickly asked Protagonist for help, who agreed, preparing to fight off the wave of skeletons while Alec focused on breaking through. Protagonist screamed in rage and with a powerful blow split the body of the huge monster, shouting at him to swallow it. The screen shows a stone corridor deep underground, and text states that this is the 64th floor, which is under the control of a boss nicknamed the Reaper of Death. They sat next to each other and ate quietly. Protagonist praised Alec for his help, but Alec sheepishly clarified that he hadn't really done anything. Meanwhile, Yora and Classia were enjoying their food in silence. Protagonist added that the main thing was that they had made it here. The girl, with her eyes closed, agreed, but added that instead of bread, someone should have been slapped. The girl asked with a confident smile if they had managed to deal with the boss. Her eyes showed concentration and seriousness. Alec, tense and sweaty, sighed heavily and admitted that the S-rank group had been completely wiped out by these creatures. The dark smoke in the background emphasized the seriousness of the situation. She called out to him, but he answered quietly and reservedly, which may have been her imagination. His silhouette stood alone in the ruined, snowy landscape. He admitted that he felt something strange, and the other man, alert, immediately raised his hand, asking what exactly he meant. A Reaper with a scythe appeared from the darkness. Someone from the team exclaimed in horror that he really was invisible. He cried out in delight, raising his spear to his shoulder, and declared that the dead were indeed capable of returning to life. He shouted sharply, warning someone not to rush forward thoughtlessly. Alec anxiously asked Protagonist to listen to him at least once, but he confidently assured him that everything was under control. The undead creatures with glowing eyes were approaching, and someone remarked that they had heard of invisible enemies before, but never thought they would actually encounter one. Alec and Classia stood in the stone corridor, discussing the demon tank, noting that its black, piercing spear was difficult to destroy or penetrate. Alec concluded that they would be redundant in this fight. A huge, ancient weapon crashed into the ground, and a voice commented that it was not just an artifact of antiquity, but a perfect fit for this idiot. Alec offered to help Protagonist, but he confidently refused, declaring that he would deal with the enemies himself, while Yorha, with a staff glowing with magic, had already taken up a fighting position in the destroyed room. Ornest screamed loudly to be trusted with his enemies and slammed down on the monstrous arm, crushing it in a whirlwind of dynamic lines and debris. During the meal, they discussed whether Alec could be relied upon for magical compatibility. One expressed doubts, the other advised them to rest, since a deadly ghost was waiting for them on the 64th floor of the dungeon. She warned him that there was a dangerous area ahead. He advised him not to waste his magic, to which she replied calmly that her time would come. Alec looked away with a frown and said that this was where the S-rank group was destroyed. Clasia called out to Alec, who was standing alone in the collapsed ruins. He apologized and said that perhaps he had imagined it when the ground shook beneath his feet. He noticed that he felt something strange, and the other man asked in surprise, where exactly? A hideous skeletal figure in a tattered cloak appeared, waving a huge scythe, and proclaimed himself, Death, the invisible enemy. Ornest confidently stated that Alec's skills had not weakened in the least, and Alec, with surprise and disbelief, asked him not to say such things. Alec accused Protagonist of deception, to which he quickly objected, lest he be misunderstood. A horde of undead with glowing eyes was approaching, and someone's trembling voice admitted that he had heard about the invisible enemies, but did not know how to fight them. One of them confidently told the other that since he was recognized as a genius magician, it would not be difficult for them to deal with this enemy. Ornest shouted defiantly at the skeleton, striking him with his weapon, and resolutely refused to believe his words. He asked her if she had known everything from the beginning, and she regretfully apologized to Alec, confirming that she had. She pointed her finger to the side with a confident expression and stated that she did not agree, suggesting that all complaints be directed to that very idiot nearby. He promised to remember that when they got out of here, then laughed and grabbed Ornest's hand, reminding him that they needed to get home alive. They stood in the middle of a ruined stone corridor, surrounded by skeletons. One of them remarked that the 64th floor, although difficult, was worth the effort, and she listened attentively. Clasia explained with cold confidence that their goal was to save the group, while Yorha, sweating, insisted that whoever they were dealing with was too stupid to understand what was happening. Someone's hand gripped the hilt of a sword with such force that the knuckles turned white, and a determined voice promised that it would not forget this, calling someone a boar. Alec boldly charged forward with his sword, declaring that he would not allow himself to be left behind, while Ornest shouted that he would handle it alone and quickly end the fight, while Clasia and Yorha remained behind, ready for action. Ornest called out to Alec, asking why he was only using the lightning spell again, while Yorha held the glowing staff in her hands and Clasia sat quietly in the ruined hall. The boy with the light, tousled hair remembered how he used different types of magic before and did the same thing in the fight against the old man. Ornest confidently declared that he would deal with the enemy himself, asking the others not to interfere while Alec and Yorha stood behind him. Someone addressed Ornest with respect, calling him Your Highness. Alec silently prepared his spell, determined to protect the crown prince at any moment. He concentrated and called upon his fastest magic, lightning, which was already crackling in his palm. Ornest insisted that Alec was clearly hiding something, but he brushed it off, saying that everything was fine, after which he turned away and urged everyone to hurry. He dropped to one knee, scanning the floor, and announced that they were close. Meanwhile, the two girls looked ahead, and one of them suddenly realized where they were. He shouted with a joyful face that they were lucky, and called out to Yorha with confidence and enthusiasm. She quickly warned him against reckless actions, and asked if he could hear her, and he, breathing heavily, leaned forward. Ornest shouted the name of the enhancement spell, and rushed forward, while Alec, Clasia, and Yorha remained behind, ready to fight against the snowy and ruined landscape. They rushed after him urgently, and one of them remarked that if Ornest was really serious, it would be impossible to catch up with him. He hesitated, but then said that he meant her magic, and she listened attentively, without looking away. She raised her eyebrows in surprise, and he smiled confidently and said that he expected nothing less from their leader. Alec confirmed that Clasia was indeed an important part of the team, to which she laughed, and Yorha nodded silently next to her. He screamed in despair, begging Ornest for help, assuring him that he would definitely die this time, while debris rained down around him with a roar. He, breathing heavily and covered in sweat, noted with surprise that his opponent still had plenty of strength, despite all the tension that was happening. Ornest screamed in rage, while Alec turned around in bewilderment, looking down to where something disturbing was happening out of sight. He explained with irritation that the culprit of the monster's rage nearby was Loki Silveria, the most evil guy from Rec Roma, and that they had come specifically to save him. Sei, seething with anger, shouted to Ornest that if he died, he would return as a ghost and haunt him for the rest of his days. Ornest, gnashing his teeth, threatened Alec that he would torment him every night until he went mad for leaving him to die, while Alec himself looked at him with alarm. One of them shouted a warning to the others, but she calmly explained that this was how Loki fought, and the other girl, pressing her palm to her chest, watched silently. Alec, with an expression of admiration and surprise, noted out loud that their opponent turned out to be a skilled deceiver and acknowledged his skill. Someone laughed wildly and angrily, shouting what the enemy was thinking when he got into a fight. Stornist screamed from below, lying in the snow, refusing to give in as a huge and menacing creature loomed over the ruins nearby. Exhausted and sweating, Ornest muttered about the betrayal of his own legs, and at that moment, Alec delivered a powerful blow to the monster's head, causing the magical sign to explode. Ornest rudely refused to accept the thanks, adding that he himself had suggested waiting a little. A monstrous figure emerged from the clouds of smoke and snow, and someone's voice regretfully reminded him that someone had been rushing him the whole time. Alec stood before the giant cracked stone creature, clenching his fists and declaring his readiness to engage in battle against the backdrop of snowy ruins. Seth's 4 fighters, a mage with a staff, a swordsman, a shield-bearer, and a man in a suit, stood in front of 2 huge worm-like monsters bursting out of the wall. Ornest desperately demanded that Lenny use the spell, but she hesitated, calling him "Your Highness," to which he sharply ordered her to simply do it. Seth's Yorha concentrated, surrounded by glowing symbols, as a powerful attack spell formed in her hands, accompanied by a pop-up inscription about the attack magic. She screamed in despair that her magic had failed again, and he furiously shouted a question. Why couldn't she use the spell in this dark corridor? Ornest, clutching the hilt of his sword, said with anger in his voice that, in the current situation, everyone had become useless. The boy with the blonde, tousled hair shouted furiously, promising to crush the enemy with his great sword skills. The young warrior deftly dodged the blow and prepared to strike back at the huge worm-like monster, accompanied by a loud sound of impact. Ornest cried out in alarm, holding his hand out in front of him as Yorha, hovering above the ground, cast a spell, and Alec stood behind, watching the events unfold in the ruined hall. The girl in the witch's hat gave an urgent order to retreat and carry the prince away, while the muscular man ran, carrying the unconscious boy on his shoulder. Alec confidently noted that such a blow should not have penetrated his defense, and at this time the armored figure with a smug grin stood in front of the fiery skull. Someone's hand gripped the hilt of the sword, and a feeling of heaviness in the hand and an anxious question flashed through his thoughts. What happened to him? He looked worried, remembering how it all started after he kicked someone out. Ornest, covered in sweat and with a desperate expression, finally realized that what was happening was because of Alec Jugret, and cried out about it out loud. With a cry, Ornest blamed everything on the curse that had befallen them after the expulsion, while Alec, Yorha, and Klasia raced down the tiled corridor, with a huge creature crashing down next to them with a roar. She asked if he was running away, but he sharply denied it, calling out to Ernest, who stood collected and focused. Ornest panicked and warned everyone to run as the huge monster chased Loki, and they raced through the snowy ruins. The monster was pushing forward with fury, and someone's voice desperately warned that it would not stop and would catch up with them at any moment. Ornest stepped forward with determination towards the approaching monster, while Klasia watched with alarm as the enemy drew ever closer. Ornest shouted for Klasia to run, while Alec and Yorha braced themselves for the huge stone monster that was rapidly approaching through the snow and debris. He angrily accused someone of ignoring him, preferring to pay attention to the fool, without hiding his resentment and bewilderment. Clutching his staff, Ornest screamed in rage at the giant creature, claiming that they had been underestimated, and struck upward with full determination. He asked anxiously for orders, whereupon Klasia commanded to protect Loki, and Ornest directed a spell of hatred to attack, while Alec silently watched from the shadows. She urged everyone to finish off the enemy and move on to the next stage, while he stood with his fists clenched, ready for the decisive action. He activated a powerful spell that enhanced strength, agility, endurance, magical energy, and senses, and magic circles began to glow under his feet against the backdrop of snowy ruins. Ornest, covered in sweat and with bleeding wounds, smiled weakly, and Klasia, with a serious look, entrusted the task to Alec, who confidently clutched the sword. The girl with the butterfly hair clip asked with interest if it meant anything, and the other, surprised, admitted that she thought she saw someone unfamiliar. Alec, with his back to the others, slowly reached for his sword, signaling that the spell's duration was over, and he was ready for the final blow. Alec remembered how Yora had given him permission to continue his preparations, after which he had concentrated on grasping the hilt of his sword, preparing for the decisive action. With determination in his eyes, he urged the others to simply believe rather than look for reasons, emphasizing the strength of the team while Ornest swallowed anxiously next to him. A slight smile appeared on Alec's lips, and despite the sweat on his forehead, he calmly explained that the enemy was dangerous because of his ability to use multiple magical discharges at once, from 10 to 20 at a time. Yora confronted the monstrous creature, activating several magic circles at once, and with cold determination, demanded that it tell her how many more it intended to create. Alec admired the skill of the cunning mage as a massive creature crashed down in the background. He then gathered all his willpower and prepared to repel the powerful attack formed by 25 magic circles, deciding that he would not give the enemy the slightest chance to move. The monstrous figure was confused as to how his opponent had dodged the final blow, but eventually admitted that it was his concentration that had allowed him to withstand the attack. Alec, standing in the middle of the snowy ruins, declared with unshakable confidence that the attack was not yet over, despite all the circumstances. Ornest shouted desperately, calling for Klasia, who stood alone at a distance with her hand raised, ready to attack. She confidently released the arrow, calmly noting that she already knew what to do, and that she didn't need reminding. The arrow hit the target with force. The monster appeared to be bound in glowing chains, while someone's voice reminded that he should not be forgotten either, and the title appeared in the frame, The Dungeon of Chains. A muscular guy with blonde, tousled hair covered in bruises smirked and declared that it was too late to run away now, calling the enemy an idiot. At that very moment, the monster received a crushing blow to the face, and someone's voice from the side noted that in front of them was just a huge target. Alec activated the magic command Quadruple Block, summoning a flaming, wolf-like creature surrounded by magical symbols amidst the snowy ruins. He calmly stood in front of the fire dragon, expressing surprise at his composure, but then confidently declared that he was mistaken and extended his hand to him. The mysterious figure with blonde hair smiled, asking if the boy was interested in magic, and warned that such attacks were useless against them. Alec recalled how he once learned a special magic from an unknown mentor, and noted that only 2 people in the entire Gardana Academy had an affinity for this technique, the creator and one other. He activated the reflection spell, blocking the attack aimed at Klasia, and prepared to take action in earnest with full concentration. Alec's words sounded confident. He was not finished yet, and was going to finish this enemy off once and for all. Taking a step forward, he was ready. The guy with the disheveled blonde hair mockingly called the enemy a beast and a fool, to which the dark-haired guy praised him, and he only admitted that this was quite expected. Alec confidently declared his genius, and Ornest, on the contrary, shouted back with no less determination, and the two found themselves face to face in a tense confrontation. Klasia laughed confidently, while Yora held back a smile, and an angry Ornest accused Alec of mocking her, and Klasia sarcastically advised him to take the 4th place potion. In the snowy, ruined place, Alec followed the blonde figure's instructions. He took a breath, held it, and then suddenly released the accumulated energy outward in one powerful burst. Clenching his fist in delight, he shouted, "Yes!" as he watched the fiery projectile roar forward, leaving a blazing trail in its wake. He excitedly told Elbas that he had managed to learn a complex spell in just 1 day, while Elbas, sweating, admitted that it usually took a month, with crackling fireballs falling all around him. Alec excitedly asked what spell he would learn next, but Alcides finished the lesson for today with a smile and suggested going fishing tomorrow, which brought joy to the girl watching nearby. Sitting by the water, Alec confessed his desire to learn more about magic, and his mentor gently noted that he had a natural gift. In bewilderment, he asked why Eldis was training him if he was confident in his future as a great magician, but he only calmly advised him to be like a river, just move forward. Standing with Klasia on the wooden pier, he tried to cast his line, and she teased him with a grin for inviting him, considering that he himself knew nothing about fishing. Ernest, beaming with delight, showed Alec something in the book, and they ran, laughing, through the snowy ruins. Soon Alec was proudly holding a fishing rod with a fish in it, while Ernest smiled at his side. He asked anxiously if she was leaving the royal capital, and if he would see her again, but she stood calmly at a distance, and called him by name, Eldest. One of the boys recalled learning that Elgadus, once the best student and court magician, had once warned him not to become a court magician, and had soon disappeared without a trace. The tense scene came back to him, the disappointed face, the muffled voice. He asked the others to listen carefully. He began to say excitedly, "I will become a court magician," while the others stood nearby under the flowering trees. The next second, their palms met in applause. The blonde man spoke the legendary group's name with admiration, specifically acknowledging Alec as the mage of Gardana's palace, while the others listened with respect against the backdrop of a ruined, snow-covered landscape. Alec revealed that he was now a former court magician, much to the surprise and disappointment of Ernest, who reproached him for leaving and called it a waste of talent. Alec froze in silence, and the other guy, with a smug smile, admitted that he had made a mistake in letting him go and mentioned the courtyard of Gardana. Klasia thanked Yora warmly, and she promised to repay her kindness someday. Alec reminded her that their leader would do that, as snow swirled above them against the backdrop of ruins. The muscular guy asked if he had handed over the rest, and the cheerful young man confirmed that he had already given everything he had, and asked for more potions. Alec and Ernest discussed the possibility of multiple floor bosses in the dungeon, and Ernest reacted harshly to the idea that one of them still posed a serious threat. He mused on the need to distinguish the clever from the stupid, and then, with smug confidence, called himself unusually talented. She merely noted that he was skilled at irritating everyone. The guy with the spiky hair asked with a smirk if the potion was enough, while the muscular one remained silent and serious, and the third one was sweating nervously, without answering. Klasia teased Alec with a slight smile, reminding him of Ernest's kindness. He pointed in surprise, and Ernest, sweating, muttered that he needed to be paid first. She confidently demanded to know everything about the second boss, and he, with a determined look, encouraged her, saying that this was the real fighting spirit. A knight in full black armor appeared before them, and the young fighter, with a confident smile, explained that the real boss was an undead creature similar to the first enemy. He informed Alec that physical attacks were almost useless and only bought time. She asked in surprise if it was a skeleton or living armor, and he confirmed. The fair-haired youth held out a shining staff in the shape of a cross and confidently said that he was giving it away, all against the backdrop of snow-covered ruins. Ernest praised Alec's skill with weapons and even offered him the chance to become a vanguard fighter. Alec reacted to his words with disbelief and surprise. Holding the sword, Alec noted with cold confidence that the enemy seemed the most annoying, but also the easiest, and then added that they were too obvious about being that way. He noted the observation skills of his opponent, who explained that he worked as a support mage and was obliged to understand the situation in order to defeat opponents of a higher rank. In his hands was a glowing sword named Schwartz, and he was informed that it was now his new weapon. Alec looked at it in amazement among the snowy ruins. She asked anxiously if Loki was trying to drag Alec into the front lines, and he, confused, asked her to wait, suspecting that there was something more behind it. With a smug smile, he told Yora that he would give him an ancient artifact, but warned him not to use any magic. She doubtfully asked if the enemy was really undead and condemned the stupidity of not using magic. At this time, the mysterious figure quietly chuckled. Alec stood with his sword, radiating confidence, while Ernest awkwardly apologized. Yora and Klasia watched intently from the snowy ruins. The man with short hair, smiling slyly, confessed his love for show, and decided to put on a great deceptive show, planning to give the enemy a dirty surprise. The blonde-haired youth asked with a grin if they really didn't want him to use magic while standing in the middle of a snowy, rocky area. Alec wondered about the usefulness of the ancient artifact against the undead, remembering that physical attacks were supposedly ineffective. Ernest, teasingly poking Alec in the forehead, warned him not to let the rude guy boss them around, adding that he didn't even know what he was really after. She tentatively suggested that the enemy might think that Alec only knew how to fight with a sword, but he calmly corrected her, clarifying that he never said that he would not use magic until the enemy was defeated. Alec laid out his plan calmly, suggesting that they fight with swords only until his signal. The other participant nodded in agreement, but emphasized that he was not going to insist. Ernest, with a confident smile, noted that magic would still have to be used for the final blow, and asked Alec's opinion. Alec agreed to cooperate, prompting a joyful response from the girl, who said that this was exactly what she had been waiting for. He then asked her to help with the spell, explaining that he did not want to comb the dungeon on foot. Clasia reacted in surprise, muttering an uncertain, "Huh?" Ernest, smiling cheerfully, explained that using teleportation required a lot of mana, and he couldn't do it alone. The girl noticed that teleport was a state secret level spell. The muscular guy asked doubtfully if he shouldn't know about it, and the girl in the beret covered her ears. Meanwhile, the cheerful guy joked that they were still acting like children. The young man enthusiastically gave 2 thumbs up and declared that no one needed to know about this. Ernest asked irritably why they were looking at him like that, and then warned them that after casting the spell, they would be as guilty as he was. The others stood in front of him on the snowy ground. He enthusiastically grabbed Alec and Clasia by the shoulders, urging them to come down together. They both listened attentively. He suggested that if anything happened, they could blame Loki, and she nodded silently. In the background, the other 2 reacted with surprise. One even got a kick. Alec called out to Yora, who turned around in surprise, and Ernest shouted something loudly, while in the background 2 others were kneeling among the stones. Alec asked Clasia how much she trusted one person. She looked at him thoughtfully, and Ernest, standing in the ruined snowy landscape, calmly mentioned Loki. Clasia explained that the Arcana dungeon was a special place with high difficulty, and 2 years ago, Loki commanded the Allied suppression force without losing a single fighter. Alec, with a gentle smile, assured her that he believed because Yora believed. Clasia responded warmly that she trusted him, even if she did not fully trust the other. Alec turned to Ernest, who turned his head, letting out a surprised, as the snowy ruins stretched behind them. Alec confidently stated that he intended to fight with a sword, and asked what the others thought, since it had been a long time since the last time. Ernest joked defiantly that Alec was long overdue for some training, while Clasia, watching with a slight smile, noted that he had been in shape for 4 years. Ernest shouted that he couldn't hear Yora, reminding them that they were in a dungeon. Alec confidently added that this would only spur their excitement. Ernest reminded Alec of the rules. Whoever falls first loses, and the loser gets a penalty. He squeezed his shoulders firmly against the rocks. The spiky-haired boy shouted in protest, while the blonde one smirked silently. A small figure appeared from behind the rocks, threatening to make Clasia come up with punishments again. He noted that it had been 4 years since they had been together. She replied that their friendship had remained strong, as they had known each other for a long time. She smiled confidently, noting that she didn't expect him to be able to distract the floor boss on his own, comparing it to the situation in Rekron. He praised her abilities and offered to teach her many things, but she threatened to kill him if he called her Chan again. He just waved it off nonchalantly, saying it was no problem. The blonde boy explained the limitations of teleportation with a grin, while the black-haired boy listened attentively, and the girl with the bandage on her head reacted with a mixture of admiration and slight alarm. Ernest warned everyone to be ready to fight at any second, and Yora and Alec listened carefully, standing among the snowy ruins. He chuckled confidently, admitted that he missed such moments, and mockingly called someone a useless extra. She confidently explained that everyone was well prepared. Everyone had a plan, weapons, and magical artifacts. While discussing the feeling before the boss fight, Clasia scolded them both, and Alex smirked at the idea that, without the self-proclaimed genius Ernest, they would have been a perfect team. Ernest immediately flared up, blaming Alec for the extra problems. They showed the royal capital of Gardana, then the wizard, who was sharply accused of lying, and demanded an immediate explanation. The boy with the bandage on his head angrily demanded an explanation, claiming that what happened was not his fault, while in the dim room a figure sat silently, watching what was happening. Ernest angrily accused someone of lying, while Alec calmly stated that he was telling the truth and denied the accusations of magical influence on his highness. The magician asked if the inability to use magic was related to the difficulties on the 30th floor, and the guy with the bandage thoughtfully accepted this suggestion. Ernest explained that on the 30th floor of the capital's dungeon, there was a barrier that canceled all magic. Perhaps this was what was preventing the use of support spells. Alec asked in surprise. Support magic? The guy with the headband grinned confidently and called the extra magic a cowardly trick. He swung his sword at the monstrous creature, explaining that the poor strike was due to the weight of the weapon, and stressing that it had nothing to do with it. He thoughtfully wondered out loud what kind of curse that guy had used. expressing concern and pondering the situation as he sat there. The hooded woman explained that Alec was likely part of the legendary student group that reached the 68th floor, but noted that there was something odd about the case. He confidently declared his intention to take revenge and refused to turn a blind eye to what had happened. Another voice sharply rejected the rumors, calling them the fantasies of commoners and accusing the target of deception. He calmly asked if His Majesty wanted to see him, adjusting his collar with an unperturbed expression on his face. Two young men walked through the spacious hall. One of them confirmed that the conversation would be about Alec, the former court magician. The second wondered if this was why they had been summoned. Ernest, with a confident smile, declared that his father completely agreed with him and laughed lightly. The crown prince said any insult to him was an insult to the entire kingdom and warned that impunity would damage the honor of the royal family. The young man turned confidently to the majestic figure, noting that he was well aware of what was happening and expressed confidence in the king's wisdom. The boy laughed and half-jokingly asked if there would be a reward for anyone's head, while the older man in the fur collar watched silently. A man in a fur-collared cloak asked if anyone had heard the name Eldest Michaela, standing in the middle of the majestic hall. The young man questioned the relevance of the person in question, while the man on the throne began his answer by mentioning events that had taken place about 10 years ago. The bearded man claimed that he had banished the court magician from the kingdom, calling him a real idiot. The same man in the fur collar said that the king had spoken to him personally, while his interlocutor only silently tried to comprehend what was said. The fair-haired man with the staff spoke seriously about the need for reforms in the court system in order to avoid an irreversible crisis in the future of Gardana. The young man firmly stated that the humiliation of the royal family was a blow to the nobility, and therefore the expulsion was justified, and the older man remembered an aristocrat who often spoke such nonsense. The man with a sharp gaze began the story from the moment when the commoner lost his noble title and entered the Academy of Magic. He returned not as a nobleman, but as a court magician, silencing his critics by demonstrating his skill and taking advantage of his status as the top graduate. The bearded man laughed loudly and mockingly asked if it was possible to call someone such a complete idiot. He thought in silence, while the other man reminded him that a year later he had disappeared from the palace again, continuing to repeat the same words despite the ridicule. The young man with long hair sincerely addressed the king, declaring that commoners were not worthless, and personally confirmed that it was they who saved him. The bearded man quietly admitted that he didn't understand why, but he couldn't stop thinking about the words he heard from one person recently. An older man with a beard, probably the king, turned to his son, named Regulus, asking if he now understood why he had been sent to capture the dungeon. The bearded man questioned the veracity of what had been said, and the young man nervously admitted that he had only wanted to confirm everything by mentioning the broken record. The man sitting on the throne announced that it was time to change the kingdom, starting with rethinking the status of the commoners. The young man asked him in surprise what he meant. An older man with a beard explained that talented people like Alec would be valued regardless of their background. The young man objected with alarm, calling the idea crazy to rely on commoners for the future. However, he soon thought better of it, remembering that this was what his father had taught him. Ernest, sweating and looking anxiously ahead, insisted that he himself was living proof of the terrible experience inflicted on him by one of those same commoners. He approached, holding torn papers in his hands, insisting that they be read immediately. The second one was perplexedly sorting through the sheets, believing that these were some dirty tactical notes about the 30th floor. Ernest began reading the notes tensely, in which Alec described the enemies, the terrain, the necessary items and skills. He muttered weakly that it was impossible to recreate such a thing without a great deal of experience. He felt out of place and regretfully realized that the injuries he had sustained would come back to haunt him, so he decided to resign. In tears and with a scream, Ernest poured out his despair, admitting that he understood absolutely nothing about what was happening. He sank to his knees, clutching his head in his hands. Confusion and helplessness paralyzed him, and the meaningless advice and murky situation only increased the internal chaos. He angrily demanded that Alec not talk to him like that and not listen to the commoner's nonsense, while Alec himself at that moment only silently watched, showing no emotion. Enraged, Ernest threw the vase against the wall, demanding that she stop looking at him like that. At that moment, someone's glove deftly intercepted the flowers that had fallen from the broken vase. He suddenly realized that Alec hadn't been useless after all, and immediately blamed himself. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath, in a room full of broken glass that resembled a subway station. Alec stood motionless, his cloak fluttering in the wind, irritated that no one was warning him, while Ornest sat with his hands to his head, warning him not to come any closer. Ornest shouted in anger, warning again not to interfere, while Alec remained calm, his face stern and impassive. He looked around at the snowy ruins, then stood up abruptly, gripping the hilt of his sword as a magic circle flared above him. He grinned and admitted that he had always known he was exceptional, but now he wondered if it was all a little too perfect. The scene cut to a dark stone ruin. An ominous figure with a sword appeared in the dark corridor. He glanced at his surroundings and noticed that the place was inappropriate, and facing the boss of a floor from which there was no escape was a mistake. He quickly told Krista to tell the Rivier Guild that they needed someone with an A rank, or better yet, a real mage. The man with long hair explained that Loki had dealt with the four-legged enemy. Behind him, the girl with the sword suggested that they stay here until he returned. Sace Ornest entered the duel with an anger against the invisible enemy, and Alec, wounded, watched the battle with determination, thinking only that he would not retreat under any circumstances. With difficulty holding back the onslaught of the armored enemy, Alec realized with regret that he did not have enough magical power to resist much longer. Sace Ornest, despite his sweat and fatigue, acknowledged the enemy's strength with a slight grin, but added that the two of them could handle it. At that moment, Alec was already preparing to strike. With a powerful lunge, he cut through the monstrous figure, sending up clouds of debris, mentally noting that the creature's movements were beyond human capabilities. Alec fired his pistol in anger, not believing that there was really no one in the room. He screamed, warning not to treat the enemy as a human, while releasing a destructive bolt of energy. Ornest, brandishing his spear, accused Alec of repeating the same move, breaking forward through the whirlwind of magic and metal. Alec charged with fury at the giant armored figure with a huge sword, fighting on the battlefield strewn with debris. Classia calmly explained that the Dullahan was an undead creature, half human, half horse, and the previous enemy was just its horse. In the midst of the battle, Alec blocked an enemy strike, thinking that the enemy had not yet shown his full strength. With one hand in his pocket and the other clutching his sword, he grinned smugly as he challenged several opponents at once. Ornest, tense and sweating, could not believe how their opponent could fight without a head and yet boldly parry every blow. Alec noted with concern the fragility of his sword despite its status as an ancient relic. But Ornest only chuckled, stating that a magical weapon would easily withstand it. From the clouds of smoke, a headless knight slowly rose up, clutching a blade, while someone from the side noticed, "This was expected." Ornest confidently stated that a simple sword was incapable of destroying the undead, and Alec nodded weakly, agreeing with this conclusion. The monster's loud screech made Alec cover his ear, but then his eyes widened as the enemy suddenly rushed forward with deafening force. Ornest screamed as the arrow flew past Alec, who coughed in pain, barely able to stand, and barely registered how dangerous the situation was. He mentally acknowledged that without the protective barrier, Yora would have been crushed. His physical defense left much to be desired. Drenched in blood and exhausted, Alec struggled to hold his sword, asking how much longer they could hold out. Ornest confidently replied that there were only 3 potions left. An exhausted Alec wondered why the fight was so difficult, to which Ornest casually remarked that it was at least 5 minutes. Ornest called out to Alec, urging him not to linger. He, tiredly taking a sip of the potion, silently continued the fight with a heavy sigh. Alec raced through the snowy ruins, shouting that he was coming back as fast as he could. In the distance, 2 fighters crossed blades. He warned of the danger of engaging in combat without magic or support, but she calmly noted that a direct confrontation was impossible, and everyone knew it, even though they could not help. In the face of the terrifying creature, Alec felt the same excitement. On the edge of life and death, where every move could be the last. Ornest shouted something furiously, and Alec, clutching his sword with both hands, answered with determination. "All this is because they are adventurers." With a mocking grin, Ornest called Alec a wreck and drained the potion. Alec, not to be outdone, remarked that the same applied to him, and then asked if this was the last potion. Sace Ornest suddenly praised Alec, noting that he really did look like a warrior now. Alec froze in surprise for a moment, not knowing how to react.